So I think we're live. Hi.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this series on the biggest deep tech trends in 2022, which is brought to you by Hello Tomorrow, along with IFF and BCG. And today, you're going to get a sneak peek at some of the most important trends in food tech for 2022. I'm Renita Kalhorn, your host, and an executive coach who specializes in working with deep tech founders. And our speakers today are Alexandre Carvalho, who's the Global Director at Innovation Marketing at IFF, Chloé Khalifat, who's a deep tech and innovation consultant at Hello Tomorrow, and Malte Clausen, who's a food system decarbonization expert at BCG. So before we dive into this discussion, I'd like to share some background about Hello Tomorrow so you can put all of this information in context. So Hello Tomorrow's mission is to act as a catalyst to accelerate the development of radical solutions that are focused on impact. So nothing less than improving the health of humans and life on our planet. And so that means leveraging two things: the power of deep tech, which is technologies that address significant scientific and engineering challenges, and then the collaboration of a global ecosystem to work together to generate solutions for industry's biggest challenges, and doing it more quickly than traditional R&D. So Hello Tomorrow does this through a synergistic model. So that global ecosystem of over 10,000 startups, VCs, and experts that they've cultivated over the years gives them direct access to the latest trends and technologies, as well as a diverse pool of expertise. And so then they can bring this to their collaborations with industry leaders in helping them anticipate key trends and then build ventures to take advantage of those high growth business opportunities. So here's a quick snapshot of the deep tech startups in the network. And as you can see, it's truly global, 128 countries represented, 9 industry categories from healthcare to food and agriculture to advanced computing. And they're in various stages of maturity, from the earliest stage of proof of concept all the way to commercialization in the market. So since 2017, Hello Tomorrow's been partnering with BCG to produce these very thoroughly researched reports on different aspects of deep tech. And you can download these on the Hello Tomorrow website. But actually this year, they're picking up the pace with these webinars and reports throughout the year, so that are showcasing 20 trends across 6 major themes that you can see on the screen here. So food and agriculture, healthcare, energy and the environment, mobility, computation, and regenerative industries are the key buckets. And if you've registered for this webinar, which you must have if you're here, you'll get a copy of the food and agriculture report directly to your inbox. So be on the lookout for that. So with that, I'd like to dive into today's topic, which is from lab to fork, novel foods and practices. And first, what I'd like to emphasize before we start is it's important to understand just how broken our current food system is. The way we eat, grow, and distribute our food now has huge costs in the way it contributes to water and air pollution, reduces biodiversity, and it produces greenhouse gas emissions. And at the same time, it's not satisfying all our needs. There are 800 million people who are undernourished at the same time that rates of obesity are increasing. And then there's this huge food waste. More than 30% of food is wasted. So the situation is urgent. But the good news is what we're going to be focusing on in this webinar, and that is that there are solutions that address these problems, solutions that are current. So Chloé, I'd love to start with you. As a deep tech and innovation consultant at Hello Tomorrow, you're one of the first to see where innovation is happening. You're out there in the field interacting with the startups and the companies who are innovating. So why don't you kick things off by sharing what you're seeing as the top trends shaping the future of food?
Sure. Thank you so much, Renita. And yeah, so there's a reason why we actually had that slide right here. I'm sorry, I'm putting that back up there. It's because, so like Renita was saying, we do have this quite exhaustive community of startups in our community. And it turns out food and agriculture is one of the biggest segments. Last year, we had to evaluate about 250 startups, which cover all geographies, all technologies, and it was all challenges. By that, we've seen startups gathering new materials to harness sunlight, or harnessing sensors, mobilizing sensors and connecting devices to understand crops, how we grow better, how we grow more efficient, more sustainably. Something also that's been a little bit different is finding some intersections in between what was considered to be distinct industries. I'm thinking mostly about biotech and agriculture. So this is one of our key focus today is going to be lab agriculture. And so out of all of those, so we evaluated about 250 startups. We tried to kind of put them together in what could be intelligible trends. So, okay, they're across all geographies, they're across all segments, but what does that mean concretely? So we came up with this, which is pretty much two distinct trends that are encompassed in something way bigger. The first one is how we coined it was taking care of our food. So because obviously you've realized these past few years that, well, when you have to take care of your food because eventually you'll end up taking care of yourself. So you'll have a lot of solutions in precision agriculture, the way you tend to your crops, the way you monitor, you get insights from those, and then you can act on your crops. We've covered quite a lot of those segments last time where we had the opportunity to discuss with Bayer regarding innovation in agri-tech. That was our first segment, very agri-focused. Our second segment is a bit more towards the consumer and with the intersection of biotech that I was mentioning right before. And we coined it from lab to fork, so making cultured everything a reality. The first cellular agriculture stake was back in 2013. That was quite a while back, almost 10 years. We thought it would never happen. Actually, Singapore has approved the commercial sale of cultured nuggets back end of 2020. So it's time to scale in a sense where we're going a little bit beyond proteins. And now we're seeing startups actually venturing out with leafy greens. We're talking about cultured cocoa, flavonoids. It's going way beyond just the current proteins and even harnessing different production methods. So you're going beyond cultured protein. Those two segments are encompassed in what we believe to be this huge transversal trends is the fact that food systems are to be considered an agent of sustainability and not pollution and destruction in our global supply chains. So obviously, it's quite a particular topic because everyone is concerned by food. Everyone eats. Not everyone has a car. Not everyone drives. Not everyone has a computer. However, everyone eats, meaning that its essentiality is crucial. And today we're seeing a lot of innovations that are cross-sector and making sure that across all of the global supply chain, food systems can actually become what we call an agent of sustainability. So quite broad, we hope that it's still understandable. But yeah, today our focus is mostly around the food segment and how new foods and new practices are actually emerging in the field.
Nice. Thank you, Chloe. I think that phrase, agents of sustainability, is really the key umbrella for this discussion today, because all of the solutions that we're going to talk about are really supporting both the health of people as well as health of the planet. So we're actually going to focus on, as you said, Chloe, it's very broad. There are a lot of initiatives going on. And so what we're going to focus on today is what Chloe's already mentioned, the alternative proteins. We're also going to talk about something called clean labeling, which we'll define, upcycling food waste, and then personalized nutrition. So Alex, why don't we start with you? Perhaps you could start by telling us what your mandate is as the Global Director of Innovation Marketing at IFF, and then more specifically, what you're doing in the area of alternative proteins.
All right. So thank you, Renita. So in IFF, in our team of innovation marketing, we are part of the division called Nourish. In Nourish, why Nourish? Because it's exactly a good connection on what you mentioned. We need to nourish the planet and we need to nourish people. So it's all about creating technologies and creating solutions that will address the biggest human challenges that we have going forward. So in our team, in the division of Nourish, what we do is develop strategies for innovation, developing innovation pipelines together in partnership with the different teams in R&D, and really creating strategies that we make sure that they are insight-led, looking at those challenges that we see in the marketplace and translate them into the needs of our customers and then consumers. So that's the mandate in a nutshell. So our team is composed of different directors supporting different programs. We have 14 big innovation programs within the division that addresses clean label, health and wellness, sustainability, so those big topics, and alternative proteins, which is a very dynamic segment that probably it comes to play big time when we talk about future of food.
And so I know you have, it sounds like you have initiatives going across the board. Let's start with alternative proteins, because you're doing some interesting stuff. What can you spotlight particular projects or initiatives that you're working on?
Yeah. First, let's start thinking why alternative proteins. Because let's start with plant-based proteins. Plant-based proteins are already very established in the market. So mainly via soy, which was one of the first crops to be really used in the food industry on plant-based, then pea, and other like wheat, for example. So those plant-based proteins are playing a crucial role as the base for this revolution that is happening now in alternative proteins. What happened is that, so let's start thinking about the market, right? Today, we talk about a market already of plant-based of around 27 billion, right? In plant-based food and beverage. And then out of that, 20 billion is around beverages. And the other part is already meat alternatives, which is becoming one of the most dynamic and diverse segments going forward. So what happened is all those traditional plant proteins are the base, but we need to look at other types of proteins for the future. Because what happened? In the future, we know that there is land challenges, right? Water scarcity challenges. So when we think about what was mentioned before on sustainability, that is the future of humans. So if we do a parallel thinking, okay, what are going to be the future sources of protein? Today, we have those established ones, but looking at new crops, for example, canola or rapeseed or different grains that are emerging, for example, or even using a precision fermentation. So creating those proteins using microbes, for example, we see as future. For example, mushroom protein. So all these, the diversity of proteins are going to create a very interesting future. It's not going to be one silver bullet that will solve the challenge, but I see multiple proteins addressing those different challenges.
Right. And I know that you had an initiative that I personally found very interesting, which is with algae or making sea flour. Can you share a few words and thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's another angle. So if we look at clean label, right, for example, we know that this is another challenge in the industry because consumers started to be driven by what we call in the technical word, like it's going to be called clean label. But to translate in simple terms, what consumers are looking for are less ingredients on the label, or ingredients that they can read and understand, like things that they have in their cupboard, like sugar. Everybody knows what's sugar. But when you talk about other ingredients like that, they have E numbers or they have different chemical names, it's harder for the consumer to understand. So the industry is moving to simplify those labels, or what we call label-friendly solutions. So what happened is that apart from that, there is a blurring happening that is quite interesting, because clean label is blurring with sustainability as well. Because those ingredients, they don't need only to be understandable, but they need to have a sustainable value proposition. So coming from sustainable sources. So when you mentioned this recent solution that we launched in the market called sea flour, which is based on red seaweed flour. Why flour? Because it is a flour. Well, so the solution is to stabilize different types of beverages. We basically took from the ocean with a very sustainable practice, using different communities in different locations and leveraging all sustainable farming of red seaweed, to take the red seaweed, mill them, dry in the sun, and with this flour, we use this to stabilize food. So it's a very simple process that uses sustainable sources and creates clean label solutions for our customers. So this is to exemplify how things are blurring, right? It's not only about finding sustainable sources, but it's also about driving those trends like label-friendly solutions or clean label.
Yes. So you're really clicking several boxes with that solution. That's amazing. And Malte, I know that you have spoken also about clean labeling, clean ingredients. What's your experience with your clients?
Yes, for sure. I think it's spot on the way that Alex described this, that there's definitely a move towards clean labeling or label-friendly solutions. And this is something we've seen at BCG. Recently, we were advising a private equity firm that had acquired a clean label or a natural ingredients company. And it's just definitely part of the valuations of companies these days goes into whether or not they are well positioned to offer these types of products to customers. So I couldn't agree more. The customers are definitely seeking out clean label products. This is a trend that is well established also in the academic literature, and companies that are able to meet that by really thinking through not just the product attributes, but what would be the implications in terms of the supply chain if we are going to deliver these products at scale. Then those companies will definitely have a huge advantage in the marketplace.
Got it. So it sounds like companies' ability to affect their impact or sustainability, that plays into their valuation, their business case, and how their assets are valued. Even
for sure, we've seen this in terms of the clean label aspect. That's definitely the case. And but you're right. If we broaden this a little bit to talk about not just personal health or human health, but also planetary health, then certainly when companies can profitably enter the marketplace with attractive products that have the correct profit margins, and in addition to that, have a sustainable narrative related to how these products are produced, and they can actually demonstrate that they're doing something in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and everything, then for sure investors are going to, we are already seeing that investors are going to prefer those types of companies, as long as it doesn't negatively affect the profitability. I mean, that's kind of like a given that you need to meet your earnings targets. But if you on top of that can show a sustainable story, that's definitely going to benefit you from an equity story point of view.
Yes, well, that's good news. And let's go back to alternative proteins for a moment. Malte, tell us, what's your experience? How does it look from your vantage point working with numerous clients?
Yes, thank you, Renita. Yeah, so last year at BCG we published. It's been just a little over a year now since we published our major report on this topic called Food for Thought, and here we made an analysis of how much growth we are going to see in this space of alternative proteins, which includes both the plant-based, the fermentation-based, and the cell-based or cultivated proteins. So the assessment there was that this is going to grow quite significantly over the coming decades, coming from about 2% of global protein consumption today, reaching somewhere between 11% as the base case, and up to perhaps as much as 22% of global protein consumption over the next 10 years, depending on technological innovations and depending on the regulatory environment. But yeah, we are still sticking to the 11% base case. is very likely, and that is, as Alex also pointed out, it's going to be a diversity of plant proteins that we're going to see in the marketplace, the ones that we've discussed here already, but also diversity in the processing and the approaches to product development. There's just a tremendous amount of innovation, both in the startup community and with corporations partnering with startups to bring new innovative products to market. So we definitely see this as an obvious growth opportunity for any company in the food space.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you've seen some surprising trends and surprising drivers or players in the industry. So can you share with us?
Yeah, certainly. So one segment of the food industry that is really driving this is the quick service restaurants or fast food restaurants, it is also known as. And this is at least to some observers a bit surprising, because maybe 10 or 20 years ago, the plant-based food category was associated more with a very niche consumer segment that were extremely into vegetarianism or into maybe health and sustainability from a very narrow perspective. And what we're seeing is that fast food restaurants, like for example Burger King, recently had an experiment with a 100% vegan or plant-based restaurant in London, which was just quite surprising to some observers at least. And they've also had some press releases about an aspiration to achieve a 50% plant-based offering over the next decade, so by 2030. Which is 50%, as I just said. We are at BCG expecting, with our current estimate, which of course will be updated, but that the global consumption will reach 11%. So it's kind of like a factor 4 to 5 compared to that. So that's quite an ambitious target, of course. But the reason that Burger King can set targets like that is that they are seeing a demand from their consumer. It's obviously a younger consumer segment that is going to quick service or fast food restaurants, and younger population is also very aware and active when it comes to the sustainability agenda and to the climate agenda. So in that sense, it actually makes perfect sense once you really think through why this is happening. But at least for many observers, it was kind of a surprise that it was going to be the fast food restaurants that were going to lead the development on alternative proteins and in effect on sustainability. But they're definitely significant players, not the only players, of course. As mentioned, there are tons of players in this space, both corporations, startups, large food production companies, but that and retailers as well, of course. But that the quick service restaurants are pushing forward with such a high pace is a truly remarkable development and very interesting to follow.
Very promising as well. And it, like you say, it kind of makes sense when you look at it, because they do have so many locations. They're able to test in a more iterative way than a company that maybe is all in on one product and
yes.
can't test as easily.
Yes, they have a great environment for rapid product testing, and that's some of the things that they do excellently, is just do product tests and see what works with consumers, and then they are agile, so they can move when it works. Excellent.
Well, let's talk then about upcycling. So when Alex first mentioned upcycling, I think of clothes or materials. I don't think of foods, something you're actually going to ingest as something that's upcycled. So what does it mean in IFF, and what are some examples of initiatives or collaborations that you've had, Alex?
Yeah.
Upcycling.
So as you mentioned, right, for the term upcycling, it's in simple terms, right, it's all about using waste. So we know, as you mentioned, right, 30-40% in the developed world of food it goes to waste. right? So probably we could feed the world using what the developed world waste in terms of food. So we know that this is one of the biggest challenges going forward on sustainability. So one of the concepts it's to how do you use all this waste to put it back to the food system, that people could use this in different ways. So in IFF, we identified some key opportunities. For example, you know that the consumption of orange, so all the orange peels that goes in different waste streams, they go to the to landfill sometimes, or they are in the organic recycling and so on. So one way is, like, for example, we partner with a company called Peel Pioneers, what they do, they basically collect those materials, and then we can select them and use these to produce ingredients using those citrus peels, for example, orange peels and so on. So this creates ultimately a kind of a circular approach, a circular design to take these waste and create new ingredients. And the material is there. So if we create this circularity on ingredients, it might create a much more sustainable future, because we are using all these materials that are coming out. Of course, there are enormous challenges going forward to select those materials, to transform them in ingredients. But in IFF, this is one of our highest priorities. How do we create more upcycled, certified? So there are now institutes that certify this kind of initiative that gives us a very interesting approach to transform and go and enter into upcycling in a bigger way. So there are other things. So stay tuned. I think this area is going to be one of the most important, not only for the food ingredients like in IFF, but the whole food industry. How do we leverage? And we see this demand coming from companies from the big food to use different types of waste to transform these into ingredients. So one area is this peels example, and we are looking into other spaces, also connecting to the big trends like the growth of alternative proteins and all that. How could we leverage those trends as well for upcycling? Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of these very important areas going forward.
And what I hear then, it's like a shift in your mindset, where now you're actually, this has become a priority. And so the more you make it a priority, the more you're going to find potential solutions. So that's very promising. And then
it's a strong story to companies, right? To brand owners, because they can tell that story to consumers, right? That their products are using upcycling ingredients, so they are creating a circular economy. So I think that's very strong to develop brand equity as well going forward.
I agree. If I had a choice between two products and one was more circular, I would definitely choose the one that's more circular. But Malte, can you share your viewpoint? Because I think I've heard you mention that for us as consumers, we see that what's wasted, in the process of eating or cooking or buying, but there's actually waste that we don't see in the distribution process.
Yes, for sure. And I would like to just also comment on this upcycling aspect, because it is extremely valuable for startups to, in particular, to work on this. I was recently at a pitch session where startups in the food space were able to pitch to retailers, and in this specific instance, which I think is relatively representative, the two startups that were working on upcycled products were getting the most interest from retailers to put it on the shelves. And one was taking pulp from the production of apple juice and orange juice and beetroot, ingredients or fibers that are otherwise wasted, and they were turning these into ingredients for different various kinds of snack products, like chocolate bars and stuff like that. And it's just an amazing story from a consumer point of view, that you can actually get a delicious snack, and at the same time doing something to prevent food waste. I mean, what's not to like about that? So
exactly.
So I completely agree with that. That's really an obvious area. And if you're then combining it in this particular instance, they were doing purely plant-based snacks. So it was like a win-win. You're doing it plant-based and you're doing it upcycled. So that's I think that's a winning combination. And as you rightly pointed out, Renita, there's actually a lot of waste in our current system. So it's just an additional benefit that we've seen. We are currently updating our calculations on this at BCG, how much efficiency gains can be moved or can be achieved from in terms of waste reduction when moving from traditional protein sources to alternative proteins, and the results will come out in our update to last year's report. But it's relatively easy to understand that when you're putting crops and food input through an animal before getting to the end consumer, there's certain inefficiencies related to that. Whereas when you can use crops directly for human consumption, as you do in plant-based and alternative protein products, then there's much less resource waste. And that's something that most consumers are just not, it's not top of mind for most consumers when you do shopping. So there's, of course, education related to that will be needed. So that's those are both interesting aspects, I would say, when you think about food reduction, is the plant-based aspect, and there's the upcycling aspect. And if you can combine these two, then you've got a really nice sustainability story to tell as well.
Right. And again, there's that education piece. If consumers know exactly how much waste is happening before it even arrives, in their cart or in their refrigerator, they might think twice about having that serving of chicken or steak, that week.
Yeah, it will be a journey, right? It will be, because we need to educate, because people don't have no idea, right, of some of the usage that upcycling can bring. And I think it's an evolution. Probably some consumers will still react in a way. So, am I eating trash, right? But that's an area that it will evolve very rapidly, because I think as consumers are getting more and more conscious, probably some years ago it would be a challenge, but nowadays we are seeing that there is much more traction for developing this.
Yes, excellent. Chloé, do you have anything to add to this discussion in terms of startups you're seeing, or collaborations, or fine-tuning some of the trends that we're talking about?
I mean, it's very, very broad again. Going back to the alternative proteins, it's again very broad. We're very lucky to be working with people such as IFF in this scheme. So obviously this is very interesting. In terms of upcycling, I'd say maybe something that could be interesting that we see in terms of deep tech, so that's really, really forward, but we do think that it could be promising, is so upcycling waste streams from the agricultural industry or the food industry to have what we call functional food. So Alex was mentioning the fact that you're having new ingredients now that are capable of being produced because of waste streams. And functional foods is actually a type of food that gives it some sort of a health benefit. And so we're kind of tiptoeing around, this whole segment around personalized nutrition. And I'm thinking of a startup, a Singaporean startup called Cosmode, Kosmode. And what they're doing is that they're recycling agricultural waste stream into a starchless noodle. So they're very Asia specific. They're making this product that's considered a staple. And it's a starchless noodle because it's actually the ideal ingredient for someone who has diabetes. So in the end, you're recycling, you're in a sustainable manner, recycling a waste stream, and it turns out you're actually benefiting a whole category of population. I think that's probably one of my favorite startups out there. But yeah,
I love that.
Going full circle, literally. And we do have quite a lot of startups in the fields like that, whether it be biomass recycling, so really tangible, or anything related to emissions. Obviously, when you have food and agriculture emissions, whether they be from livestock or from processes, you have upcycling of methane into new materials. Sometimes even with food, That's another alternative protein that's really, really out there, but maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, we'll see. We'll talk about it. But so yeah, very, very diverse. And a lot of different startups are in the field. Even though sometimes it's a handful, depending on the topic, it's quite promising.
Wow, excellent. Well, you've given us a great lead in to the final area that we wanted to talk about today, which is personalized nutrition. And I saw in the Hello Tomorrow report that this industry alone is expected to be over 3 billion by 2028, just this area of personalized nutrition. So Alex, why don't you kick us off with what's going on at IFF in this area?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting topic, a hot topic, well, because with all what we discuss around people's health, right? I think the beauty of personalized nutrition. So what is personalized nutrition? Is the possibility to connect with people individually. This already happens, right? You have nutritionists, you have physicians that they recommend their patients. But now the beauty with digital technologies, that's where personalized nutrition and also precision nutrition that we can talk in a moment, we see the merge of digital with food. That's the beauty of this space, because it's when you can at massive scale help people to eat better, help people in their metabolic health, help people in their specific health challenges. So what we see is that this is an enormous potential, because with digital technologies, you can connect individually with each consumer and you can help them to understand what they're eating. And in IFF, in food ingredients, that's a space that we see a big role, because we could clarify to consumers what are they eating, what kind of ingredients, and so on, and help brand owners to address those needs using also real-time data that those consumers are providing to the brand owners. So that's an interesting area that I think it will evolve very rapidly in the future. More and more we see, for example, also precision nutrition, which is then more, which is a bit different. For some consumers might be more invasive because it requires their blood sample that you need to map the DNA, for example, of each, to map the genome of each one, to then have specific recommendations. So you have those two areas, right? One at massive scale and some that are even more personalized, like precision nutrition. So this is a very exciting area where we see the food industry moving. We see the big food entering this space. We see the food ingredients as well entering this space. And in the future, I think this will play a key role on health and wellness, as we talked earlier, as a big trend, and post-pandemic even more, right?
Yes, that's very exciting. I mean, it also plays into the waste issue as well, because the more precise you can be about exactly what nutrients you need, then the less that's wasted. Malte or Chloé, what would you add to this subject about personalized nutrition?
Yes, I would just, if I may, just share one example, which is one of our clients right now is asking us about this specific question on how to make sure to offer to customers who are interested in this an easy way to do meal planning and to map or to match their personal nutrition needs with what they're actually purchasing. So, of course, today there are online tools where you can go and log everything you've eaten during the last day or during the last week, and then you can get calculations on macronutrients and micronutrient profiles to see if you're missing a specific mineral or specific vitamin. But it's still a very manual task to actually do this, and it's obviously not just based on what you're purchasing at the supermarket. You need to remember, what did you eat when you were at a friend's house, or when you were grabbing a piece of fruit at work or whatever. So I would say no one has yet really solved this to make it really easy to register everything you ate during the day. And I think the startup that succeeds with that is going to be well positioned for the future. So I'm very interested in keeping up on this space as well and seeing who will come up with a solution that we can bring out to consumers globally.
Oh, I am too. I mean, I think people are busy, right? So they don't need more work, more tasks to do, but
Yeah, exactly.
there's so much benefit that having this information could bring.
Yes.
Chloe, anything to add? Oh, I think you're muted.
Classic. I honestly, 2 years after COVID, it's still happening. We've talked a lot about digital enabled solutions and generally speaking data, but in terms of, because I'm always thinking about the deep tech solutions that we have behind and the startups that I was able to see, there is a little segment, again, a handful of startups that are actively looking into synthetic biology to actually get new ingredients tailored to individuals. So you have this prior segment, which is gathering data, understanding your consumer, and then potentially acting on it. And then you have your input, how you are going to modify potentially this person's metabolism, or making sure that the food that they have is specifically formulated in such a way that it responds to their key needs. This is very, very straight ahead. And I was talking before about this sort of intersection between biotech and food tech, and now we're actually in between, well, health tech, med tech, and food tech. A lot of those applications you're actually really going to see in the health industry, but technically it's something that, well, you're eating to make yourself better. So it's again that intersection between those two industries, which I think is very, very interesting.
Yes, and what you've emphasized now is that most of what we're talking about, it's not science fiction, somewhere in the future. This is happening now. And so it's just a matter of maybe changing behaviors, getting it to market, getting the branding. So it's all very encouraging and optimistic. So I think we'll pause there. For anyone who's listening, make sure you check out your inbox, because you're going to get the Hello Tomorrow report on the agriculture and the food tech trends that we've had and they're discussed in the last 2 webinars. And you're going to get the statistics, you'll get examples of use cases, there's development timelines, so you can kind of see where the opportunities are now or more in the future, where the hot opportunities for collaboration are. And what I'm taking away is just there's sort of these macro trends around, first of all, everything's accelerating, right? Coming together and accelerating the acceleration. There's precision, so we can do things with much more precision. And then it's creating this circular effect. So we're really getting more out of our resources. So as an optimist, this is all very encouraging for me. And I want to thank my guests, Malte, Alex, and Chloé. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.